Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and this evening we have another discussion about the state of the city, and who better to explain it to us than the president of the city board, Julie Flowers.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's getting to be an exciting time. The city council has passed the budget, and at the same time, the teachers union and the city still haven't settled. So I'm guessing you're going to get a request sometime in the near future. Well, we need a little more money to settle this one out. What else is in the works that we can expect some surprises?
I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily some surprises, although I do think you're right to identify that one of the unknowns right now in the city is contract negotiations.
Yeah.
The teachers obviously are in negotiations now, but we do have other city units that are also going through negotiations and bargaining. And of course, an important priority is to make sure that the people who work hard in and for our community are paid justly and fairly. So I think you're right to say that that is potentially an unknown, not just in this budget year, but believe it or not, we're already starting to look towards building the next budget. And so I think those will be some of the pieces that will become more clear as contracts are settled and we're able to figure out sort of what that will look like then going into FY26.
Yeah, and the mayor has put out a couple of letters that showed up, at least on Patch, that the city is making some kind of fairly large offers. So that it's going to come out that, at least as the offer is on the table right now, Beverly teachers will be doing better than Salem, but not quite as good as Danvers. And still don't know, I haven't seen anything yet. I don't know, maybe you know better, what seems to be the stumbling block that is preventing a resolution to this.
Well, the city council, and I know you know this, but just for folks who are watching, we're not part of the negotiations process. So in terms of your question about some of the stumbling blocks or where there's still distance between, I'm not in those conversations, so I can't really speak to that with authority. I will say, I think you identified some of our peer communities. One of the things that I think the mayor articulated, I think as well, is it's clear looking at Beverly teachers' salaries that Beverly was behind our peer communities. We know our educators do really important and really good work each day. So to get caught up, when you are behind in terms of what people are being paid, it's going to be a big investment to get caught up. And I think there is a commitment to making sure that we get there for our teachers. I think you're right to say that it will require some other budgeting decisions. And as I said, making sure that people who work hard in and for our city get paid fairly and justly is really important. It's important in any community. And we will have to make some other choices. I think the mayor said publicly, so I'm not speaking out of turn, I think people have already seen this, that one possible choice that will be made is to, as he said, zero out the roads and sidewalks budget item. And I just want to say a little more about that because I have gotten a lot of questions. What will that mean? And will it mean that there's no more paving, no road work? And so I just feel like it's good for people to hear, because that is, that's something that people see every single day is the condition of their sidewalk and their street. That one of the ways that we can address roads and sidewalks, even without budgeting for it, although it may mean that we can't do as much of a chunk at a time, is to rely on some of our free cash. So at the end of a fiscal year, money that comes back as free cash can then be distributed to the general fund. And so knowing that we may be wanting to go to free cash for roads and sidewalks is a way to be able to do some of the work, the upkeep that needs to be done, even if it's a way to pull back in the budget. It will change how we plan out for a little bit, our paving, but it is one of those examples of a place where we can go as a community and do some thinking together about how do we make sure that we can address the needs of the people who work for and in our city, and spread the budget around more equitably.
Well, the term free cash is kind of misleading because really what it means is come the end of the year, you
Yes.
find out that some departments didn't spend all the money they thought they were going to spend or they had budgeted for, and now you have money left over. So in reality, it means that you probably won't be until the end of the year before you can decide, well, we've got some money, we can pave such and such street or tear up the sidewalks here and put in a new one, or take down some trees and plant some new ones. So there's going to be I would guess, a quiet period for roads and construction work until you get closer to the end of the fiscal year, so that you have some idea how much of this so-called free cash is available.
Yeah, you're right to point out that free cash it's a confusing term because you're right. It's not just extra money that we know is going to be.
It didn't come from a helicopter.
But so you're right. You're right to say that it is what's unspent. The state then certifies. Looks at our budget, certifies what we actually do have available, and once that certification comes in, that's really the only time that you can, to your point, reliably apportion out the free cash. When the budget is built, you can make some guesses, especially if you're looking at new growth money. That those are new developments or new projects that were not on the tax rolls. They get completed. That money comes in. It's sort of a shot in the arm at first, and then of course it's built into the tax roll. But you are right to say that free cash, you can try to guess at it in a budgeting process, and our financial forecasting committee will begin their work actually next month, and so part of what they will be looking at is trying to forecast all of those things. But you raise a really good point that to be responsible about free cash, it really requires being sure of what you have in hand and then making some decisions.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be forced with, okay, we need to take another loan.
Yes.
And I don't know how many times we can do that. And I think this gets to be an issue of, okay, where do you set your priorities? Obviously, paying the teachers and the rest of the city employees is a high priority, because otherwise things don't get done right. And already the teachers are pulling back of, well, we're not doing the non-contractual stuff. It's a way to get somebody's attention, okay? And I don't know what the equivalent is with the rest of the city employees, but basically, I think we're having to listen. You're going to have to look at things from a priority standpoint of what's important. And I think one of the things that's going to have to be adjusted is we have to start looking at the problems we have right now and start fixing them right now, and less emphasis on, well, it's going to be for the future, or save the planet with the green stuff. So a lot of this, I think, it comes down to, I guess, part of the discussion about the library, where the city council apportioned about $3 million, I think it was, to fix the AC system. And next thing you know, it's an $18 million major overhaul of the library. To some extent, okay, some of those things have to be fixed. Do they have to get fixed right now? And I'm all in favor of ground source heat pumps. But when somebody comes back and says, well, it's less than ideal ground underneath it, how many more holes does that mean we have to dig? Does it become economically viable? And did we get an update on the what's the cost going to be? What could it have been? What are we paying extra for this? And I think it gets to the point of it'd be nice to do, but the money is tight, and we can't do nice to do things. We got to have to do things.
Yeah, I think you're right that we'll have to make some harder decisions in tough budget years. That is true, and I think people in the city understand that because we all see that in our household budget.
Yeah.
So I think you're exactly right. So the kinds of tough decisions you sometimes have to make in your household budget, the city will be grappling with those same questions about, how do we identify, to your point, our top priorities, and then how do we triage the things that we know we need to do, but maybe we can't do them right now. I think the library, one of the things that I think did not serve us well in terms of how the library rolled out was your point about the initial approved money from the city council was really to, in part, look at a study and look at the feasibility, and then between that and the sort of end result presentation, there was lots happening in the administration, lots of learning and lots of developments, and the city council sort of got the end result product of that, and the public along with the city council.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that we definitely learned from that process is the more that the city council, but really it's the public. I'm not saying it's just the city council somehow needs to be privy to this information. I think when the city council becomes aware of things because they're filed publicly for us to review, it's about the public getting to also be part of that process step by step. I think if we'd been able to take those steps together, we may not have, in the end, still approved the library project at that time. I mean, as you know, the vote was not close on the council. There wasn't an appetite at that time to do that project for more than a majority of councilors. But I do think it might have been a different conversation. So my hope is that for future projects, that can be something that will be a more public conversation step by step, so that the public doesn't feel like at the end suddenly there's a much bigger number than was expected, and the council as well, but we can really dissect those things together along the way.
I think sticker shock does not go over well, no matter how it's presented. And the point you're making is that, we've got certain obligations we have to meet. And just casually throwing out a big number and say, well, this is we have to do. Well, it'd be nice to do a few extras in there. Doesn't work. And I think we're going to be forced to sort this out.
And with the library, to your point about being forced to sort it out, I think there's no question that the library, the HVAC system at the library has been sort of on its last breath for quite a while. So there's no question we are going to have to sort that out and figure out what to do, because it's not just about HVAC systems in a building like that, of course, are not only about the comfort of the people in the building. That's a piece of it. But for something like the library, there's many assets within the library, books, history, different kinds of periodicals. Having the right kind of climate control in a building like that, as you know, helps to really preserve and protect those things as well.
Yeah. And, excuse me, the library wasn't available because it was a hot day. But in reality, the library was shut down for Juneteenth. It wasn't going to be open anyway. And I think some of this kind of misinformation doesn't really help understand the problem and help reach a solution. So that I think the point you're making is that the more open and transparent the situation is, the smoother it goes down, because this is a big hit with the teacher's salary and the rest of the salary increases. And it's going to show up in people's tax bills. And I ran the numbers on my house, and my tax bill has been going up an average of 4.2% since 2008. And we got a 2.5% limit, but in reality, there's no limit on the assessments. So the assessment creeps up every year, and the net result is you get a bigger tax bill.
Yes, you're making a really important point. I think the Proposition 2.5 in Massachusetts is confusing, I think, in that people, as you said, you open your personal property tax bill, and if your home is assessing at a higher value you're right. Your personal tax may have gone up more than 2.5%. And I think that often creates a lot of confusion because we sort of all know, well, Massachusetts has a 2.5% limit. And so, that's a levy limit, which means overall across the city, the limit has to be 2.5%. But you're absolutely right that individual homeowners, and especially right now, people are really feeling that because homes in Beverly are selling for higher amounts, which means that the neighboring properties assess higher. So it's a really great time if you're looking to sell a home, but it can create sort of a waterfall challenge for people who are looking to stay in their home. It's great to have more value assessed in your home, but it does have that other impact of your personal taxes feeling higher. And to your point, you were opening it and saying, "Oh my gosh, mine have gone higher," and that's even with the past 2 years, as I think George, the city didn't go over on balance to the whole 2.5% levy limit, trying to give some of that tax relief. There are definitely folks in the community for whom we know it's a real challenge, even when the levy's not going to 2.5%. And then the flip side of that coin is exactly what you're identifying in terms of our budget, which is the expenses of the city are also high. We have commitments that we need to honor, and we also have people's salaries that we need to be really thoughtful about and thinking about. And so the biggest source of revenue that a city has comes from taxes, commercial and residential. And so not going to the full levy limit is a really good benefit in some ways. It creates some level of tax relief, but it does leave questions about then how then do we fund everything that we need to do.
Yeah, there are obligations and there's limits to how much taxes you can raise. And you can't go around and arbitrarily reassess everybody's property just so that, we can hold it to 2.5. That doesn't fly.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues coming up, and I think it's good to have a much more transparent system so people can understand, like you say, when you open up that bill and what happened.
Yes.
Well, you have some idea, it's going to be higher, so that's how much higher it is. And I think Beverly's got ways to go in terms of getting better communications out, because I don't see any reasonable source that we can find things. I guess you can always say, put in a commercial for BevCam. You can always watch the cable.
That's a great plug to put in, George, because I think I agree with you. I think more transparency as we work through processes in the city is always going to serve us all well, because people want to be engaged. They want to understand what's happening. It's a busy city. There's lots of things going on, as you're pointing out, and so our communication could always be improving. And sometimes, as you were saying, sometimes it's we may have something that we need to confront or solve together that, in the end, we may not be able to come to a solution that everybody, it's their first choice solution. Yeah. But I think having people be able to be involved and understand step by step throughout the process and feel like they understood how it unfolded really helps, as opposed to, like you said, just surprise sticker shock or a surprise end result. That never feels good. And so I will say your plug for BevCam is a good one, because it is one of the great community assets that we have that allows people to, as you know, follow local meetings, local events, even if they can't be there in person at the time. Yeah.
So I think what would help is, I guess, a better advertising of what's coming up at certain meetings. And you can go into the city's website and get a copy of the agenda, but it's only out like a day or two in advance. And it's a little difficult to plan to either be there or watch it. But at the same time, there are some issues that were on the budget, were on the table, were being talked about, and Folly Hill is one of them. That 5-6 years ago, there was a lot of exercise going around of, what are we going to do with Folly Hill? How are we going to develop that area? And then I guess they decided they have a 5-year hiatus where nobody did anything or said anything. And recently, surprise, we're going to put 424 apartments on Folly Hill. And what? Again, it's a sticker shock kind of thing that, how do we manage that much? And yeah, you can get to Folly Hill coming off of 128, but you can't get back onto 128 and head west. How do you get there from here, you know? So I think there's a lot of details of what else is going to have to happen and how do we prepare for it. And I've heard rumors that, oh yeah, we got some more money to study a bridge over 128 to get to Dunham Road. Well, that's another one of these things that's been kicking around since the Scanlon administration. So I think this idea of transparency and continually updating needs to be much more rigorous that, oh yeah, at least every year or every 6 months, there's a statement made that, by the way, this is what we've been doing, or by the way, nothing's happening because. And there are enough issues around that I think it'd be worth talking about, it'd be worth discussing in a frequent basis.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're pointing to some ongoing but longer term projects, and I think you raise a good point that sometimes those can feel, even for folks who were following them when they started, can feel like a surprise when they come back, or people move into the community for whom those conversations it's new. It's they're just beginning them. You're right. Folly Hill is a challenge. The transportation piece is a challenge.
Yeah.
It's also one of those situations where the property owner there is a by right development that can happen there, and so I think that's always the challenge for a community to figure out with a property owner when there's transportation or access challenges. How are we going to address those? Yeah. And I did want to mention, as we were talking about communication, it's not a perfect solution because, of course, there's many ways that folks look to access information, and not everybody certainly is online a lot or on social media. I did want to mention that one area where I definitely know that if people are on social media, that I've seen a lot of improvement in our city communication. A lot of information coming out is people, if they're on Facebook or on Instagram, following the My Beverly 01915 page. That's information that's coming from City Hall, but it's a good spot to see community meetings, especially are posted there. Communication is not a one-shop solution. That's what I always think. Yeah. We're never going to find the one perfect thing that will reach everyone because people are getting their information many different ways. So I say that knowing full well that that's not going to be a solution for everyone. But if folks are in the habit of looking online and aren't yet following those accounts, it's one more way to sort of layer in getting some of the updates, particularly about community meetings. Yeah.
So I think that's helpful that people should start to look around. Say it again, what this channel is? It's
on, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, either of those social media pages, and the city's account is public, so even if people don't want to have their own account on one of those social media outlets, you should be able to still see what the city is posting. Yeah. But it's My Beverly 01915 is the name of the account. So people can look for that. And as I said, it's not a perfect solution because communication needs to happen through many outlets. Mm-hmm. But that is one where it can be an easy way to sort of quickly see if there's a community meeting or something like it coming up.
Well, along the same lines as you say, people have different access to different things.
Yes.
One of the things that popped up on my computer recently is I got stock in GE. I used to work there. And one of the branches that they split the company into is something called GE Verona. Mm. And they just made a big splash that they are donating $300,000 to match the equivalent amount of money that the state is going to put up for something called Massachusetts workforce skills cabinet. So it's sort of an enhancing the trade school idea, where they're trying to develop people with the skills to work in this green industry, especially with the wind turbines and solar panels and that kind of stuff. So there's a passel of money out there. How do we get Beverly to get a piece of that? You know, what's the route to get to somebody who's going to write a grant request to tap into that fund and get something for Beverly? Because I think this is one of the issues with the school system, especially, that there's more kids that want to or need to go to Essex Tech than it can take. And one of the big challenges the city has left is how do we properly address the educational benefits and advantages of these kids? And the whole idea of, well, Beverly was not going to reinstate the old trade school when it built the new high school because Essex Tech was going to take care of it. Well, Essex Tech didn't. So are we still obligated to not have a trade school or some sort of activity? So this is one of my pet programs, obviously, but I would imagine lots of other people. The issue of 2 water meters is another one. Pat Lucci has been pushing that for quite some time. And how do we make something like this happen?
Well, I'll sort of try to address both of your topics. They're both good ones, and they do come up, as you mentioned. They're frequent and important ones. So with the grants and the trade school question, sort of 2 separate answers, but one positive that I wanted to just mention is we are fortunate. We have a city grants director, Catherine Barrett, who really does an excellent job, both sometimes writing the grants herself, but sometimes working with department heads. You know, particular grants sometimes are really targeted for certain areas. Yeah. So, for example, grants that have come in that benefit our fire department and fire safety. Ms. Barrett works with the fire chief to get those grants submitted. So a real positive is that we actually have seen a lot more grant funding come into the city since we have started having that position. And that's a positive because, of course, anytime that you're bringing in a grant, it helps with that wants and needs balance that you were addressing, because we can do more when we're getting grants that we qualify for. And certainly, you never want to imagine that there's grants out there that you could be qualifying for that you're not able to access. So our grants director, I think, really does a great job of helping us to get some of that money. With the Essex Tech question, that's a huge question. You're absolutely right to identify that there are more students in Beverly who would like to be able to get a trade education than Essex Tech can accommodate. And so some of the things that we've done to try to address part of that or to create more access is to partner with the tech to have what's called this After Dark program. Yeah. I know you know about that, where students can attend Beverly High and then they go in a bus over to Essex Tech. They attend Beverly High for their core academic classes, go to the Essex Tech facility for their trade classes. But even that is actually over-enrolled, or we can't, not every student who would like a seat would get a seat. So this year, another partnership that we've forged is with Salem High, which does have some trade school components still, and has lower enrollment. So there are seats available in Salem's programs, and so it's been great to see this new partnership that would open up more opportunity for students from Beverly High to be able to go there, also participate in trade school learning and education while doing their core academic classes in Beverly.
Great. So we've had a half hour of fun.
It always goes really fast when we're chatting, George.
And obviously we need to get together again because I think there's more to discuss. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us this evening. And stay tuned. And if you have an urge to pontificate, we can always make space here for you at the table. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.